Hi folks, on to video number 3 that concerns the planet Uranus, and I feel after the new moon and in general I just feel so much more embodied doing this video. I'm excited to do it. I feel so much more coherent than the last two, which were a little bit more long-winded. I also realized that to some extent with my last two videos, yesterday was the first day that I actually went for a walk, you know, masked and social distancing and observing all that kind of stuff, just to get out there. And you know, it again made me think so much about these videos. I think that last week, or about 8 or 9 days ago, I did a slew of videos and they were just so much more coherent and so much more together. And an extra week of sheltering in place really kind of, it's interesting how it kind of clouds you, you know, and how it affects you. And I didn't even know that it had started to affect me physically, bodily. So the idea of actually going for a long walk was enormously helpful, and I realized that even simply just circulation in certain parts of my body, I could tell how much that had increased. It was remarkable. And there was something about, again, this new moon in Uranus, conjunct Uranus, and I've done 2 videos on it. That's practically an hour's worth of material for you to listen to with the videos I did yesterday and day before yesterday. So you can go back and listen to those if you have not yet seen my new moon in Taurus conjunct Uranus videos. Occurred on April the 22nd at 7:27 p.m. Pacific time. It was interesting that it was after this, what in my mind is a liberating new moon, that I decided to change things around in such a way that they make me more effective. And if there's one thing I want to start this particular video with, as a summary of the last 2 videos that I did, it is to state and say that the best way I feel to take advantage of this new moon that we just had 2 days ago is to use the principles of spontaneity and liberation to effect change. Uranus is a planet of change. It's a planet that liberates you. It's a planet that creates epiphanies. It gives you the oomph to create quantum leaps. And I'm talking now in terms of quantum leaps of productivity. Whatever that means for you, wherever Taurus sits in your chart, take a look at that if you know where Taurus sits in your chart. So the way to utilize this new moon is to use its energy. It's an energetic new moon. Even though Taurus is not an energetic sign, it is an energetic new moon that you can use to make changes that can impact your productivity in a way that gets you moving and working and being more effective in ways that you have not before, even if the changes you implement are subtle and not huge, like going for a walk. You know, it made me sleep better. It made an enormous difference. And as a result of that one change, I'm already on my way to making a couple of other changes that may seem minor, but they are not in the larger scheme of things. They're kind of they're radical improvements. And Uranus is a planet of radical improvement. It is also, this is the word I wanted to convey to you, it is also a planet of spontaneity. It's intuition, flashes, spontaneity. So you've got to be able to figure out and balance, as I mentioned to you, and this is going to be a theme for 2021, you've got to be able to balance your need to have a routine that makes you feel secure and nurtured, and the ability to, in the moment, break that routine to be able to catch a wave that has been building, so that in catching it, you can capitalize on the enjoyment and, again, the productivity of spontaneously following where those epiphanies are coming from. Oh, I should do this. Oh, I should take care of this. Well, I was going to do, but I feel like doing this. I feel like doing this. You know, and so often it is our patterns and our routines, but usually at 11 o'clock or 11:15 I do this. Well, I'll get to it. See how these routines that are there to ground you and that may have been put in place to make you productive can now be dismantled to make you even more productive in some ways. So spontaneity becomes a word. Well, Uranus is featured today because Uranus is in the sign of Taurus between 2018 and 2026. And I've been doing videos on current transits, and this is a current transit, and it's worth addressing this current transit right now because we've just had a new moon conjunct Uranus and we've been talking a lot about it. And once we're done with this particular video, we're going to move on to other topics. We've talked about spontaneity, intuition, flashes of insight, aha moments, quantum leaps in understanding, technology, and humanitarian improvements, scientific, measurable humanitarian improvements, as all being governed by the planet Uranus. On a personal level, a Uranus transit, I find, liberates people and makes them more independent. It makes them more authentic. It just makes you more independent. It breaks restrictions around you. You become truer to yourself, and you just, again, can create quantum leaps, folks, of quantum leaps in your development and your progress. Uranus entered Taurus briefly in 2018, retrograded back to Aries, and then came in for good in 2019 and is here till 2026. If you look at and it was in Aries since from 2010 to 2019, with 2018 and 19 being these handoff years. If you know your chart, you can actually see where Aries sits in your chart and figure out for yourself whether during that time Uranus liberated you in that area or part of your chart. You would look at where Aries sits in your chart, what house it occupies, and what that house stands for, and whether or not between 2010 and 2019 you were liberated, made more independent, given a certain amount of freedom, given the opportunity to be truer to yourself in that part of the chart. Uranus is now in Taurus. If you know where Taurus sits in your chart, the same principle applies and is at work between now and 2026. So on a personal level, know that. On a larger level, Uranus was happier in Aries and more unfettered and more aggressive and more eager, more readily able to have its way, whereas, as we've already discussed, the sign of Taurus, it is in its fall, it is not particularly happy, it may not necessarily be as effective, it's going to have to fight for this change. And a lot of this change and a lot of this battle is going to be between, as I've already mentioned, us allowing for a natural flow. The sign of Taurus is very closely related to Mother Earth. And, you know, Mother Earth does not rush. She's strong, powerful, little sentient beings, puppies and kittens and ducklings, have the strength to grow into fully fledged adults, as do baby. You know, we encounter these situations or these beings where we think, how many risks is this being going to have to overcome in order to reach adulthood? And yet they do. Grass grows between pavement, you know, inexorable. The force of creativity, the force of nature, the intelligence of trees and plants to know when to grow, the intelligence of insects, the intelligence of the natural world. Waits for no one, is extraordinarily powerful, and we're experiencing it now with the shelter in place with regard to just how powerful and how ready Mother Earth is to kind of take over and sort things out. Always there. And it is this idea of everything in its natural flow. You know, a plant, a tree, I'm looking at a calamansi tree here. A tree does not rush to create its fruit. A tree waits and does its thing, and when the natural time occurs, it grows its fruit, and it's plentiful and it's beautiful. And Taurus has this quality to it. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to do it the way I know I'm going to do it. It's going to be the safe, the conservative way, often. If we're applying it to human behavior, and it plods along, and it's powerful. But it doesn't create epiphanic independence, and it doesn't create adventurous authenticity. And with Uranus here, there is going to be, on multiple levels, and particularly next year when Uranus squares Saturn, another planet that is a conservative planet in an innovative sign, is going to clash with an innovative planet in a conservative sign. And this new moon already starts to bear its imprint. So somewhere this idea of productivity and this idea of routine and this idea of slow and steady wins the race with quantum leaps, somewhere that is going to be at work in our lives, because Uranus is going to be somewhat, it's going to try and break the china a bit. And so, you know, it should be fun. On a personal level, this is really all I wanted to convey, which is where's Taurus? Where does it sit in your chart? Where's Aries? Where does it sit in your chart? What does Uranus do? To some extent, it's a transit that's very easy, difficult to apply generally. So I've already talked about how, if you know your charts, you can get a sense of where Uranus and Aries and Uranus and Taurus have impacted. If you don't know your charts, you don't know your birth time, then I've already introduced the idea that there's a clash between, there's a more dynamic clash between innovative changes and spontaneity and routine. There was one thing that I noticed as I was researching this transit that I found interesting and notable, and I hope that this is not something we have to deal with. The last time Uranus transited Aries, we saw the rise of right-wing fascism in Europe, in Germany most especially, but also Italy, other parts of the world were taken up with this concept of us versus them, of exclusivity, of exclusionary politics. It was in the 30s. And when Uranus entered Taurus, it brought the war with it till about 1942. And really, the heaviest, the most intense, the part of the war that we really, where things were really touch and go. Uranus in Aries has an explosive quality to it, 2010 to 2019. So my hope and prayer, a transit works a certain way in our charts. And again, wherever Uranus sat in your chart and gave you liberation from 2010 to 2019 may have felt rather explosive, personally, in terms of freeing yourself from shackles and independence and authenticity. But then as we get to this transit from 2018 to 2026, it might be more plodding. But on a global level, I couldn't help but notice when these transits had occurred last. And all you need to do is Google Uranus transit dates in Aries, Uranus transit dates in Taurus, and you'll be able to see the last time Uranus transited Aries, as it did 2010 to 2018, we had the rise of right-wing politics in Europe. And then when Uranus entered Taurus, there was a handoff period again, back and forth. Retrograde and direct Uranus was between these two signs. Sorry, my right eye is getting stuck a little bit. We had the war. So I'm going to make that mention, I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to hope that, it's not the only transit in a chart, it's not the only transit that is operating, it's not the only aspect that is operating, and I did not go back and say, let me look at the charts for every year from 1929 to 30 to 31 to 32, 33, 30, and kind of see exactly how this developed. So I just made note of that and let it be, but I couldn't help but think about some of the similarities of the things that we're dealing with today in terms of the way people are thinking and believing and behaving, and the timing of this transit before. So for what that's worth, we'll see how and where that goes, and hope that things don't develop to a head in that way, because there may have been other extenuating circumstances and aspects and planetary configurations that contributed to whatever it was that got started in the 30s and late 20s and into the 30s and came to a head in 1939. Okay, well, with all that said, there's Uranus and Taurus. We've talked a fair amount about the new moons. We've talked about Taurus. I'm going to want to move on to a few other things in the next few videos. Next week is an important week. I want to go ahead and talk about why. Here's what is coming up for me to say. Insofar as the new moon yesterday is gradually bringing you a certain amount of energy, and insofar as the word I want to use is galvanized, insofar as you feel galvanized to make changes, commit to it. We're coming up to, starting next week, we're coming up to a period that goes into the summer that is really very, very potent, because we're going to soon have 3 eclipses, June the 4th, June the 20th, and July the 4th. And there's a handoff of eclipses taking place. And we have a final set of eclipses that is about to occur and gather momentum once and for all that has been in place since July 2018. And these galvanizing changes may well put you in a place where you are able to ride the waves, another metaphor that keeps coming up today, very sort of oceanic and earthy in its own way, where you are able to ride the waves that are brought forth in a way that is adventurous and fun and works for you, as opposed to not being able to catch a wave. It's not a question of getting slammed to the ground as much as it might be a question of not being able to catch the wave. And life is more fun when we're able to catch the waves. You can always wait for the new moon in Taurus to bring things from you from the outside. I gave you some examples, or at least I gave you one example for a client for whom the new moon kind of rolled itself out in a very textbook way. And as I've mentioned to you before, sometimes folks will come to me and say, when's the right time to do this and when's the right time to do that? And I will often say to them that what I notice is that as long as you are prepared and as long as you're working on things, the right time will take care of itself, because the universe will conspire in such a way that you may be working on an email or a novel or something for 2 or 3 weeks or months, and you may be dying to go ahead and send it out, but it gets sent out when Mercury enters that part of the chart. It's one of the funnest things for me as an astrologer to look at how and when things occur, but they occur when you or the client or me have been in action and been working all along. So, the prioritization will take care of itself. Other things will come up. The transits will keep working to put things on your plate that have to be dealt with. So this is all a way of saying you can wait for things to come to you with this new moon, and they will in their own way. Or if you have a certain amount of energy and you feel the impetus to spontaneously make certain changes that have been working in your mind and that can somehow improve and make and lead you to making radical changes in the part of the chart where Taurus sits, I would exhort you to do so. Even energetically general, even if you don't know where Taurus sits, it may be really helpful to do so over the next couple of weeks, especially starting this week, because we are starting to enter a pretty powerful and potent and galvanized time of the year. This whole year is kind of powerful and potent and galvanized with the Saturn-Pluto and then Jupiter-Pluto transits and everything. I've also discussed how April and into the first week of May is a time of tremendous forward movement, even if it doesn't feel that way with the shelter in place. If you think about the fact that so much will have changed by the time we're done with this forward movement, that is the very definition of forward movement, even though we are sheltered in place. And then certain aspects of changes that will start to roll out on us in mid-May and then into late June and July will be playing a certain amount of catch-up, but it's going to be catch-up, sure, but it's not going to be without its shake-ups, because the eclipses will come around and demand that changes, fated changes that are in the cards for us, are going to play out for us, a lot of us, as the summer progresses. So, great. At the risk of repeating myself one last time, if you feel inspired to make a spontaneous, productive change that's going to help you, don't let your routine stop you from doing it. Try and jump in and take advantage of the energy. And if you are inspired to take any actions that somehow connect you to the planet or connect you with nature or get you moving, all that kind of stuff, just pay attention to it. Keeping your local laws and regulations in mind. One more thing, and this might be actually the most important aspect of this transit of all, and we'll see how this goes till 2026. Uranus and Taurus may actually give Mother Earth a chance to assert herself. There's so much going on with regard to climate change and the impact of humanity on the environment that in many regards the planet of liberation and epiphany and shocks and sometimes disasters, but the planet of independence and authenticity and reclaiming oneself in the sign that has to do with the planet might mean that over the next 6 or 7 years, one hopes. And, one of the accidental byproducts of this really tragic time with regard to the pandemic has been, I'm standing here outside. I like to do these videos outside, even though there can be ambient noise and distractions. I'm kind of stubborn and Taurian about this in my own way. I have my moon in Taurus. A part of it is the air is so much cleaner. And when I was walking around yesterday, I know people have said this, but it was the visibility was astonishing. I've mentioned this before, the height to the sky is astonishing. Gone are the days when Los Angeles was a smoggy place, but still, I mean, you think you were seeing into the distance. And the way I'm seeing into the distance now, with the kind of clarity that is in the air, is just astonishing. So one of the most important aspects of this transit may well be that we feel galvanized, or that the planets take care of galvanizing important conservation and ecological changes that need to occur to preserve the health and beauty of the planet. One can only hope. There's a certain amount of activism that is increasingly in place, I would say, since 2018. Increasingly, with Greta Thunberg and a lot of stuff that is starting to gather momentum. Certainly this time has given people a lot of pause. Also, again, it's coming up for me to say certain advantages of the shelter in place in terms of are very Taurian, very Uranus and Taurus, very, for those of us who are not dealing with the illness directly, the idea of the change in rhythm and routine, the idea of what feels like the right amount of intensity as opposed to over-intensity, which is what we experience all the time, the idea of being able to balance self-care and taking care of our responsibilities in a way that actually feels a little bit more normal and natural and in line with the rhythm of the world, the idea of being able to observe the beauty of the planet, the idea of being able to, for those of us who are able to do so, very Taurian, very slow down, one step at a time, we'll take care of this, get in rhythm with nature. And with Uranus here, what is on the one hand a constricting time is also proving to be a revolutionary, thought-provoking, epiphanic, and liberating time. Not for everyone, but for a certain population that inhabits this planet. And I wonder, and again, Uranus and Taurus, technology. I think people who were resistant, Taurus, to teaching classes online are finding, first and foremost, that there's a group of people who, as always, have taken the charge and are using the technology to launch courses and classwork and making things more accessible in ways that, and once you start to make the adjustments where you live with regard to where your computer's placed and where I think even some of the kind of hard-pressed naysayers about, I want to be here and I want to be there and I always want to be, are like, there's certain advantages to this. The idea of being able to do things in our own time in ways that are convenient to us and in line with our rhythm, using technology to put those things in place, the world may never be the same again. And some of the changes that are put in place with regard to our awareness of the planet's quick ability to assert herself, and the use of technology to kind of slow us down but make us more productive at the same time, seemingly confining us in a space but liberating us at the same time, could be very Uranus and Taurus factors. And it remains to be seen what we go back to. And it remains to be seen whether this remains consistent or starts to make some sort of headway. Uranus will go retrograde and then direct, and retrograde and direct, and retrograde and direct. And it will be squared by Saturn in Aquarius. So it's not an easy path. But, heading towards 2026, one can only hope and pray that those aspects of this pandemic that have been accidental benefits can lead to changes that are beneficial for us overall. Even when we think of the pandemic, however it started, wherever it started, and we think of it in Uranian terms, what happened, how did it happen, how can it be prevented, we'd be hard-pressed to not look at nature and our impact on nature, our massive travel, our frenetic activity, and not draw a connection between the rapid spread of the pandemic and our lifestyles, which were not exactly Taurian at that time. And the idea of intelligent, unrelenting inquiry to create positive change, and that generates clear understanding, intelligent understanding, and applies that understanding in innovative ways to support humanity, could be very Uranus and Taurus. Okay. Enough on this transit. You are welcome to... Oh, my hair looks so much better today than it did yesterday. God, I thought I was... Anyway. More videos to come. Feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel, like this video, comment on it if you found it useful and something comes to you naturally. Likes and comments increase traffic on YouTube, is my understanding. If you click the subscribe button, there's a bell icon next to it. So if you click on that and click all, then you'll be notified when I do my next videos. My contact information is in the subject area below. I really should do this earlier in the video because I have a feeling that many people who by the time they come to this, they're just like, all right, he's done. Anyway, my contact information is the subject area, so if you're interested in a reading, interested in inquiring about rates, you're welcome to do so. And if you're interested in me creating an easy-to-use or read version of your chart that is all in English, so you don't have to deal with all those symbols and glyphs around a circle, that will tell you what house sits in what part of the chart and what that stands for, you are welcome to inquire about rates for that as well. Just know and keep in mind that you need to know your birth time for something like that. And more videos to come, more changes ahead. All right, thanks.